Snow makes its own kind of silence. Not the peaceful kind you find in a warm room with the world shut outside, but the heavy, watchful quiet that settles over open ground like a lid. Sound gets swallowed. Distance lies. Everything looks closer than it is, flatter than it is, safer than it is. In daylight, the snow can blind you, turning a ridge into a white mirror that throws the sun back into your eyes until you're squinting through pain and pretending you're not. That was the first lie the valley told. The patrol moved like a dark scratch across an endless page, 6 figures spaced out, heads down, breath steaming, boots crunching in crust that broke with a brittle snap. They'd left the last line of trees behind an hour ago. Up here the terrain was a bowl, broad and shallow, with sparse pines clinging to the edges and 2 ridge lines sitting like teeth on either side. Wind had scoured the slopes, smooth in places and piled drifts in others. It looked simple. It looked clean. It wasn't. The first burst came from above and behind, sharp as a whip crack, and the sound didn't echo the way it should have. Snow ate the report. The bullets didn't. They snapped past ears, slapped rock, tore through fabric. One man pitched forward like his strings had been cut. Another dropped to a knee, tried to turn, and fell sideways into the depression they'd been crossing. Down! Down! The squad leader barked, voice raw in the cold. He hit the ground hard enough to knock the breath out of him, then crawled into the nearest shallow dip, barely more than a wrinkle in the snow. The rest followed, scrambling, sliding, elbows and knees digging through crust to reach the same meager pocket. The depression wasn't cover. It was hope shaped like cover. Ice-crusted rocks rimmed it, small and cruel, offering a few inches of protection if you pressed your face into the snow and made yourself smaller than you'd ever been. Another burst stitched the edge of the depression. A shower of powdered snow sprayed into their faces. A third burst came from a different angle, crossing the first, and suddenly the squad leader understood what he was hearing. Discipline lanes. Overlapping. A net. Someone had painted the ground with fire, and they were lying in the center of it. Where? He shouted. Spot it. No one could. The snow glare made everything shimmer. The ridges were bright and empty, sunlight bouncing off drifts and rock faces and turning every shadow into a trick. The radio operator, young, cheeks already wind-burned, shoved his handset against his ear and keyed the mic bass. He stopped. The speaker was hissing like a live wire. He tried again. Bass, we are taking static. Harsh, thick, purposeful. Switch channels, the squad leader snapped. The operator did. Then again. Then to their emergency frequency. Each time, the same hard wash of interference, as if someone had built a wall of noise and parked it on top of them. Comms are jammed, the operator said, and his voice cracked on the last word. The medic was already moving, crawling toward the first man who'd gone down. Blood on snow is obscene, too red, too bright, like paint thrown against a white canvas. The wounded man had taken rounds high in the shoulder and chest. He was trying to breathe around something that didn't want to let him. The medic's fingers were bare despite the cold, because gloves were clumsy, and clumsy got people killed. His hand shook anyway. Hold still, he said, not kindly, not cruelly, just urgently. He tried to get a tourniquet higher on the arm, but frozen fabric fought him, stiff as cardboard. The strap slipped. He cursed, yanked it tighter, and the wounded man cried out, the sound thin and animal. The squad leader lifted his head a fraction. Somewhere out there, beyond the glare, someone had him in their sights. He could feel it like pressure between his eyes. A mortar round popped on the far side of the bowl, not close enough to hurt, close enough to announce itself. A second followed, walking a little nearer. Then a third, nearer still. Bracketing. Not random. Not panic firing. Someone was measuring the distance the way a butcher measures cuts. They're shaping us, one of the riflemen muttered. His lips were blue. The squad leader tasted the truth of it. Fire from the ridges was funneling them. If they tried to move toward the tree line, rounds raked the approach. If they stayed, mortars would keep walking closer until the depression became a grave. The light machine gunner, broad shoulders, calm eyes, shifted his weapon onto a rock, pressed his cheek down, and returned fire in controlled bursts. The weapon barked, loud against the muffled world. Snow jumped where round struck. It felt good to do something, anything, even if it was throwing pebbles at a cliff. For a few seconds, the enemy fire thinned. Then it came back heavier, like a hand slamming down. The machine gunner kept firing. The barrel began to smoke, a faint thread in the cold air, heat fighting winter. He paused, swapped his grip, fired again. The belt ran fast. Their ammo wasn't endless. Nothing in the cold ever felt endless, not even fear. The squad leader crawled to the forward observer. Older, compact, the kind of man who didn't waste words. "Smoke," he said. "We need smoke." The observer nodded and keyed his own device, tried to reach higher command. His face tightened. He tried again, eyes narrowing, jaw locked. "Nothing," he said. "We're black. Hours until extraction." They all knew the plan. Recon the suspected site, confirm, pull back to a pickup zone by late afternoon. That window was still out there, waiting like a train that wouldn't slow down for them. But the minutes between now and then suddenly looked like an ocean. A sound rose over the wind, unnatural in the snow. A voice, distorted, carried by a loudhailer somewhere up on the ridge. "Lay down your weapons," it called, in a language close enough to understand. "Send us the marksman. Send us the one we want. You live." The squad leader froze. The riflemen stared at each other. The radio operator swallowed hard, eyes wide. "Marksman," the machine gunner said, baffled. "We didn't bring." He stopped because someone had. The quiet one hadn't been in the depression when the first burst hit. Or maybe she had, and he just hadn't noticed, because she moved like a shadow, even in daylight. A spare piece of the patrol, as far as some were concerned. An attachment. An extra. Now the enemy was calling for her, like she was the entire point. Another mortar popped, closer. Snow sprayed into the depression, peppering faces with ice crystals. "Ignore it," the squad leader growled. "They want us to panic." The loudhailer voice laughed. "Send the package with her," it called, "or you die slow." Package. The word hit like a punch. No one had said anything about a package. The squad leader turned toward where she should have been, where he'd last seen her, low, quiet, rifle hugged close like it was part of her. He didn't see her now. A burst came in, closer than before, and something hard slammed into the rock above the medic's head, chipping stone. The medic flinched and kept working. Fear versus function. There was no room for anything else. Then the rhythm changed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no heroic swell. Just a single, sharp crack, different from the machine gun, different from the enemy bursts. A lone shot that seemed to slice the air. An RPG gunner on the ridge, visible for half a second as he lifted the tube, jerked backward and vanished behind his cover. Another single crack. An enemy figure who'd been leaning over a radio set collapsed as if he'd simply decided to lie down. The enemy bursts faltered, not stopped, not ended, but their tempo stuttered, like a drum line missing a beat. The squad leader raised his head again, just enough to see through the glare. He couldn't spot the source. He saw only the effect, an enemy position that had been confident suddenly shifting, heads snapping around, bodies flattening. "Who's shooting for us?" one of the riflemen whispered, and the words came out like prayer. The squad leader scanned the ridgeline, looking for a second friendly team. There was none. They were alone out here. They were supposed to be alone out here. Another single shot. A figure carrying something bulky, a cable coil, maybe dropped and rolled, landing awkwardly in the snow. For a heartbeat, the radio operator's handset hissed, and the static thinned, almost forming something like a voice. The squad leader lunged toward him. "Say again," he shouted at the dead air. Then the interference surged back, a wall slamming down harder than before, and the radio went dead again. The enemy didn't know what had hit them, but they knew they'd been hit. They began firing in wider arcs, spraying the likely angles. Mortars paused, then resumed, but their cadence had lost its precise confidence. Whoever was taking those shots was not just killing. They were cutting tendons, and she was doing it unseen. Earlier that morning, before the valley lied to them, the world had felt almost manageable. At the forward outpost, the air was so cold it seemed to ring. Men warmed their hands on metal mugs, laughed too loudly, told the same jokes they always told because routine was a rope you held when everything else was slipping. The briefing was short and blunt. A suspected enemy relay, sensor, and jammer had been detected near a ridge corridor. Not a big installation, not a fortress. Something portable, something designed to blind patrols, break comms, and make a small enemy force feel larger than it was. Go in daylight, the platoon commander said. Confirm. Mark. Withdraw. No hero stuff. Everyone nodded like they hadn't heard that line 100 times. The squad leader, staff sergeant, a man who carried exhaustion like a second rucksack, tapped the map. We move fast, we move light, he said. We don't get stuck out there past the window. The radio operator complained about batteries. The medic joked about the cold curing his nightmares. The machine gunner checked his weapon with slow affection, and she sat apart, cleaning a lens with the corner of her scarf, eyes on nothing and everything. When the squad leader introduced her, it was almost an afterthought. Attached marksman. She's with us for Overwatch. One of the riflemen snorted. Overwatch in a white bowl? That's cute. Another grinned, not unkind but dismissive. Extra weight on a recon. She didn't respond. She didn't bristle. She didn't try to prove herself in the room. She just checked her dope card, tightened a strap on her optic, and counted her magazines twice. She carried less ammunition than most people expected a sniper to carry, because she hated excess. Excess made you slow. Slow made you loud. Loud made you dead. She'd learned that in a place where hesitation had a body count. Before they stepped off, she reached into an inner pocket and touched a small sealed envelope. Hard edges, thick paper, the kind of thing you didn't open unless you were authorized and desperate. She didn't look at it. She just confirmed it was there, as if the feel of it grounded her. On the march out, the others talked, breath puffing, voices bouncing off frozen air. She moved on the edge, scanning. She noticed the first anomaly a kilometer from a bowl, straight lines in the snow that didn't match wind patterns. Drag marks. Something heavy had been pulled. Not recently. The edges were softened, but not ancient either. She stopped near a low rise and crouched. Someone's been here, she said, quiet enough that the words almost vanished. The squad leader looked back, impatient. We know someone's been here, he said. That's the point. It wasn't a patrol, she said. It was equipment. He didn't ask how she knew. He just waved her forward. Schedule mattered. Window mattered. That was protocol. That was what kept you alive most days. But she kept seeing things. A windbreak made of branches arranged too neatly to be natural. A spot on the ridge where sunlight flashed off something that wasn't rock. A half-buried marker. A strip of cloth stiff with ice, tucked into a drift like a subtle flag. Someone guided positions, she murmured, and no one heard her. As they climbed toward the bowl, comms began to degrade. The radio operator tapped his handset. Cold's killing it, he said. She listened to the clicks, the warble of interference that didn't match distance or weather. That's not cold, she said, and again it landed in the snow without taking root. When they crested the ridge and the bowl opened below them, the sun was high. Snow was bright. Silence felt heavy. She stared at the ridge lines like they were mouths. And for the first time that morning, her calm slipped just enough that the squad leader noticed. What is it? He asked. She didn't answer right away. She looked down into the wide, beautiful trap and saw the geometry of it the way a hunter sees a field. It's too clean, she said finally. No tracks. No birds. No. The crack of the first shot cut her off. Now, in the depression, with blood-staining snow and static strangling their radio, the squad leader remembered that moment like a warning he'd ignored. Enemy fire resumed with renewed focus. Whoever was up there had absorbed the shock of losing a few men and adjusted, tightening the funnel again. Mortars walked closer. The medic hissed, "He's losing too much," and pressed harder, knuckles white, as if pressure could fight physics. The machine gunner swore as his weapon stuttered. A hiccup in the feed, cold and heat making metal unreliable. He slapped it, cleared it, got it running again. The loudhailer voice returned, closer now, carried on wind that seemed to blow directly into their depression. "Send her," it called. "Send the marksman. Send the package. We spare the wounded." "Shut up," the squad leader roared, though he wasn't sure if he was shouting at the enemy or at the fear rising in his own chest. A single shot cracked again, calm, measured. An enemy burst died midstream. Another position went silent. The squad leader's eyes narrowed. Whoever was shooting had a plan. They weren't firing at the nearest target. They were hitting something important. "Where are you?" he muttered. Not into the radio, into the snow, into the sky, into the idea of help. The answer came in absence. He realized she wasn't in the depression. She hadn't been for at least a minute, maybe longer. "Marksman's gone," the radio operator said, voice small. The rifleman glanced around, looking for her dark silhouette. They saw only white and rocks and the lines of bullets. She bailed. One of them spat, anger flaring because it was easier than terror. The squad leader didn't believe it. Not because he trusted her, not because he'd known her long enough to claim it, because the shots were still coming, and every one of them was changing the battle in small, surgical ways. She hadn't run away. She'd moved, and if she had moved, it meant she was alone out there, somewhere between ridgeline and bowl, with enemy eyes searching for the source of their sudden pain. He wanted to call her back. He wanted to demand an explanation. He couldn't. Protocol needed comms. Comms were dead. Improvisation was all they had left. In the snow, moving feels loud even when you're silent. Crunch. Crack. The betrayal of crust underweight. The whisper of wind through fabric. The pulse in your ears that sounds like footsteps when you're trying to listen. She slid out of the depression during a lull, when a machine gunner's burst drew attention and mortars paused to recalibrate. She moved low, using the shallow ripple of terrain as cover, dragging herself forward like a shadow pulled by instinct. A round snapped past her head, close enough that she felt the air move. Snow puffed beside her cheek. She didn't flinch. Flinching wasted motion. Wasted motion got seen. She reached the mouth of the shallow ravine she'd noticed earlier. An ugly cut in the snow where meltwater had once run, now frozen in a blue ice and hard angles. It wasn't obvious from above. From the depression, it looked like nothing. But she'd seen the way the wind scoured it, the way it dipped below the line of fire. She dropped into it, and the world changed. The ravine muffled the battlefield, turned gunfire into distant knocks. The walls were slick, narrow, forcing her to move slow. A fall here would be loud. Loud here would be fatal. Her rangefinder was clipped to her vest. She thumbed it on out of habit. Nothing. The screen flickered and died. Cold had eaten the battery. For a heartbeat, irritation rose, hot and useless, then vanished. She switched gears. Manual estimation. Ridge height. Known distances. Pacing. This was why she checked her dope card twice. This was why she carried less ammo and more patience. She moved deeper, boots sliding on ice, fingers numb even through gloves. Above, round stills snapped across the bowl. She could feel the battle through vibration and timing. She found the first proof that her instincts had been right. A firing shelf, carved into snow and reinforced with packed ice, tucked into a fold where it wouldn't be visible unless you were looking for the unnatural symmetry of human work. Empty now. Its shooters either shifted or dead, but there were brass casings scattered, partially buried, and the snow around it was stained with oil and ash. Not a spontaneous ambush. Not a lucky position. A built one. Further along, she found a cable line, half buried, running like a vein along the ravine wall. She traced it with her eyes, following it toward the ridge. The cable disappeared under netting and snow camouflage, then re-emerged, leading toward a higher point. Relay. Jammer. She didn't need a device to confirm it. She could feel the discipline of enemy movement, the way their fires were coordinated from two ridges, as if they shared eyes and ears. Without a local relay, it would have been chaos. With one, it was choreography. She moved on. Her boots slipped on a patch of blue ice, and her rifle knocked rock with a sharp clack. She froze, heart hammering, breath held. Above, enemy fire paused for a fraction, like a predator's head tilting. She waited, counted her pulse down. In cold air, her breath wanted a fog. Fog could betray you. She pressed her mouth into her scarf and inhaled through fabric, slow. No shout, no flurry of rounds into the ravine. Either they hadn't heard, or they had too many problems already. She was one of those problems. Ahead, a small quad drone rose from behind a snow berm, buzzing like an angry insect. It climbed into daylight, its tiny camera turning, scanning. So they had eyes, not just rifles. She watched its pattern. It wasn't random. It orbited the bowl, occasionally dipping toward likely positions where a counter-sniper might be. It was hunting for a muzzle flash, for movement, for the one thing the enemy couldn't stand, an unseen threat. She moved under overhangs where snow had formed a lip, hugging the ravine wall. She used shadows cast by jagged rock, slipping into brief moments when the drone turned away. Then she made the choice that would look insane on a map. The ravine ended in a wind-scoured face. Open slope, hard-packed snow that reflected the sun like polished steel. No trees, no rocks big enough to hide behind. Just a diagonal traverse across exposure. But she'd seen the glare. She'd felt it in her own eyes. From above, looking down into that sunlight, movement would blur. A dark figure might vanish into the brightness if it moved slow and used the right timing. She crawled onto the face and became a smudge in white fire. Every inch felt like a gamble. Her fingers dug into crust. Her knees slid. The slope wanted to pull her down into the bowl where the kill box waited. Above, gunfire continued in bursts, enemy lanes still overlapping. She moved when wind gusts kicked powder snow into the air, creating brief veils. She froze when the gusts died. At the end of the traverse, she reached a high shelf, a narrow ledge with a view into the bowl's flank. From the depression, it wouldn't have looked like an angle. From the enemy's ridgeline positions, it sat in a blind seam where their fires didn't naturally reach. An impossible angle, earned through cold and risk. She settled in, pressed her cheek to her stock, and looked through her optic. The world snapped into clarity. Enemy figures half hidden under netting. A radio relay operator hunched over a set, cables leading away. An RPG team crouched behind a snow berm, tube angled toward the depression. A squad leader a few meters back, giving hand signals, calm as if conducting an orchestra. Force multipliers. She checked her ammo. Not much. Enough if she didn't waste. Her barrel was cold, which helped. Cold air pulled heat away fast, but also made metal brittle, fingers clumsy. Every shot had to be clean. Every shot had to matter. She waited for a wind lull, for stillness, for the moment when the world held its breath. Then she fired. The spotter with binoculars went down first. Not because he was the most dangerous, but because he was the eye that would see her if she fired again. The shot was a clean interruption. A man leaning forward, suddenly slumping, binoculars dropping into snow. The enemy paused, confused. Heads turned. Someone shouted. The drone's orbit tightened. They didn't know where she was yet, but now they believed she existed. She could feel their attention shift like a spotlight searching in darkness. She didn't give them time. In her mind, she built the ladder again, the way she always did when chaos tried to pull her into reaction. First, the relay. Break their coordination. If comms returned for her team, even briefly, they could call smoke, call help, call anything. And even if they couldn't, breaking the enemy's ability to choreograph would matter. Second, the RPG. The tube could turn that depression into a slaughter. Third, leadership, cohesion, tempo. Fourth, crew-served weapons, suppression that pinned the patrol in place. Fifth, the enemy sniper, because if they found her, none of the rest would matter. She put the crosshair on the jammer operator, waited for the drone to pass behind a flare of glare, its camera blinded for a fraction. Fired. The operator's head snapped back. He folded sideways, hitting the snow with a soft collapse that felt wrong in the scope. A hand twitched once, then stilled. The cable line slackened, like a severed tendon. Down in the depression, the radio operator's handset hissed. The static thinned. A voice tried to form. Anyone came through, broken and fragile. The squad leader lunged for it. This is static surged again. Weaker this time, but still present. The jammer hadn't died entirely, or there was a backup. The wall of noise was cracked, not shattered. Still, a crack was something you could exploit. On the ridge, the RPG gunner lifted his tube, as if deciding to fire anyway. She shifted the crosshair to his chest and fired. He dropped mid-shoulder, tube slipping from numb hands. The second RPG man froze, eyes wide, as if the world had revealed a ghost. He didn't fire. He didn't move. He burned seconds in shock and second life. Enemy fire became frantic for a moment. Bursts sprayed toward the shelf, toward the ravine, toward any place a sniper might be. Snow kicked up around her position. She didn't move. Movement drew eyes. She let them waste ammo and fear. Then the enemy did what competent enemies did. They adapted. Smoke puffs blossomed on the ridge, not to hide the depression, but to create visual clutter, to mask movement. Decoys appeared. A helmet on a stick, a jacket tossed over snow to draw fire. A pair of men broke off and began climbing toward her flank, moving in short bursts, using the smoke as curtain. The drone changed its orbit, widening, looking for the subtle flash of her muzzle, the disturbance in snow, the heat of her barrel. A second drone rose, higher, slower, its camera steady. They were triangulating. They were turning the hunt on her. Her optics shivered as something struck it, fragment, ricochet, ice chip, spiderwebbing the edge of the glass. The center remained clear, but her view narrowed. She exhaled once through fabric. No panic. Panic was noise. She shifted to the crew-served gunner, an enemy weapon that had been hammering the depression with steady bursts. She waited for him to lean into his firing stance and fired. He collapsed onto the weapon. The burst stopped midstream. Below, in the depression, the sudden silence of that one lane felt like a door opening. "Move the wounded," the squad leader shouted. "Now!" The machine gunner and a rifleman grabbed the leg-hit teammate and dragged him behind a thicker rock, using the lull to pull him into marginally better cover. The medic crawled after them, still pressing a bandage into the shoulder wound, still fighting the cold that made blood feel slow and thick. The squad leader repositioned the machine gun, angling it toward the tree line where enemy fire had been funneling them. "We break for the ravine," he said. "That cut. She saw it." "How do you know?" The radio operator gasped. "Because she doesn't run," the squad leader said, and surprised himself with the certainty. Up on the shelf, she saw their movement begin, small shifts, bodies crawling toward the ravine line she'd used. Good. They were exploiting the opening. Now, she needed to keep that opening open. The enemy sniper revealed themselves with a shot that snapped so close to her cheek she felt warmth for a second before the cold reclaimed it. The round chipped rock beside her, sending a sting of grit across her face. A shallow cut open on her cheek, hot and wet. They'd found her approximate shelf. She didn't flinch. She pressed her cheek harder into the stock, breathing through pain, and shifted inches at a time, using small clumps of snow as micro cover. She knew the enemy sniper's job. Watch for movement, watch for fog, watch for the tiny betrayals. Her breath threatened to steam. She angled her scarf, exhaled downward, controlled the plume. The climbers were closer now. She could see them in peripheral scope view, using smoke and folds of terrain, moving with purpose. Not reckless, not stupid, competent. The drones continued their orbit. She needed a shot that would break the enemy's cohesion. Not another gunner, not another trigger finger. The brain. She searched for the true commander. Not the loud one, not the man firing. The one slightly back, the one directing with gloved hands, holding a handset like he believed in control. There, he was half hidden behind netting, posture calm, turning his head to watch the bowl, gesturing sharply to shift fire. The kind of man who didn't flinch when mortars walked closer because he trusted his calculations. She steadied. The world narrowed. Snow glare vanished. Wind became irrelevant. Fear became background static. She fired. The commander's body jerked, then folded, dropping the handset into the snow. His gloved hand twitched once, as if still trying to signal. Then it went still. On the ridge, something intangible broke. Hand signals stopped. Men shouted over each other. Suppression became reactive instead of shaped. Bursts fired too long, too fast at the wrong places. Mortar cadence faltered, a pause too long, then a round landing off pattern. The kill box lost its geometry. Down in the bowl, The squad leader saw it. He didn't understand why it happened, only that it had. He seized the moment the way drowning men seize air. "Geo," he shouted. They moved in a coordinated scramble, 2 riflemen laying covering fire, machine gunner firing controlled bursts, medic and squad leader dragging the wounded as the radio operator clutched his handset like it could save them. They crawled, slid, then sprinted in short bursts toward the ravine line. Enemy fire followed, but it was sloppy now, chasing instead of controlling. Bullets kicked up snow behind them, in front of them, around them, but the funnel had widened. Gaps existed. Up on the shelf, she watched them move. She felt the climbers closing. She felt her ammo count like a weight in her pocket. She had a choice: stay and cover with near-empty rifle, risking being overrun and leaving the package in enemy hands, or move and risk the squad losing Overwatch on the run. Her rule whispered through her mind. Not a mantra for glory, but a scar. One shot, one change. What change was needed now? Not another kill. Not another collapse. Time. She looked for something she could make loud. Near the relay position, an enemy supply pile sat under netting, fuel canisters, ammo boxes, spare batteries. A fragile nerve center. She waited until a climber rose higher, exposed for a fraction, and the drone dipped lower to confirm her position. She fired at the fuel. The impact wasn't cinematic fireball. Cold air and snow smothered flame quickly. But the canister ruptured, spraying fuel across snow, and the ammo pile popped in sharp cracks as rounds cooked off. The noise was chaotic, startling. Men flinched, ducked, shouted, unsure if it was an attack, a mortar, a trap. Confusion bought seconds. Seconds bought lives. She used those seconds to move. She slid backward off the shelf, dropped into the seam of terrain behind it, and became a shadow again. Shots snapped after her, too late. The enemy sniper fired twice more, guessing. Both rounds punched snow where she'd been. She moved low, fast, using folds of ground, slipping into the ravine mouth just as her squad reached it from the other side. They saw her then, not as a rumor, not as an invisible hand, as a person, cheek bleeding, eyes steady, rifle held close like it belonged there. The rifleman who'd said she was extra weight stared like he didn't recognize her. "Ravine goes through," she said, voice flat. Not triumphant, not dramatic, just information. "Stay low. Ice on the left. Don't bunch." The squad leader opened his mouth, probably to ask where she'd been, probably to say a dozen things. Anger, gratitude, relief. None of it came out. There wasn't time. They moved. In the ravine, the sound changed again. Gunfire became distant. Wind moaned overhead. Boots slipped on blue ice. The medic muttered instructions through clenched teeth as he kept pressure on wounds and tried to keep the wounded men conscious. Behind them, the enemy recovered from shock and began pursuit. They were competent. They didn't abandon their objective just because a commander fell. Someone else would take control. Someone else would want the package. Someone else would want the propaganda victory of dragging the marksmen out of the snow alive and broken. They followed. The patrol moved deeper, pushing toward the fallback spur near the planned extraction corridor. The route was rougher than the map suggested. Snow piled in drifts, wind-chiseled edges, small cliffs masked by white. The time pressure that had felt theoretical in the briefing now pressed like a hand against their throats. The radio hissed occasionally, the interference no longer a solid wall, but still strong enough to make clear calls impossible. The relay had been cracked, not killed. Somewhere behind them, someone was trying to rebuild the noise. At a bend in the ravine, the squad leader risked a burst of transmission when the static thinned. "Contact! Jammed! Wounded!" he barked. He didn't know if anyone heard. He didn't know if the words went anywhere. The marksmen, still quiet, still minimal, shifted to the rear, covering their trail. Her optics' spiderweb edge caught light. Her rifle barrel was smeared with snow and grit. She checked her remaining rounds with a glance that held no emotion. The rifleman who dismissed her earlier moved up beside her, breathing hard. You saved us," he said, like he was trying to convince himself. She didn't look at him. "We're not out," she said. A distant buzz rose. One of the drones. It had followed the ravine, hovering above, searching for openings where it could see down into the cut. "Keep under cover," she said. "It's looking for gaps." They hugged the left wall, where overhangs formed. Snow fell in small showers when the drone's rotors disturbed loose powder. Ahead, the ravine widened into a spur where the terrain rose toward a ridge that would lead them to the pickup zone. The squad leader signaled a halt. Everyone crouched, panting, steam rising from mouths. The medic checked the wounded. The shoulder wound man was pale, eyes glassy. The leg hit man's teeth chattered so hard it sounded like a rattle. "We need extraction," the squad leader said, and his voice was both command and plea. They improvised. Mirror flashes. A flare tube, pulled from a pouch, fired into daylight, arcing a bright red smear against white sky. Minutes dragged like hours. Enemy fire began to probe again. Not full assault, testing. A few rounds snapping over the spur, searching for where they'd emerge. They were close. The marksman watched the ridgeline with a stillness that made her seem carved from the snow itself. Her cheek cut had frozen at the edges. Blood darkened her scarf. The squad leader glanced at her, then at the others. "Why did they call for you?" he asked finally low. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She reached into her inner pocket and pulled the sealed envelope out, held it for a second as if weighing whether to reveal it. Then she shoved it back. "Later," she said. The enemy wanted that package. The enemy had known they would bring it. That meant either the sensor site had detected them early and triggered a rehearsed plan, or someone had whispered to the enemy before the patrol even stepped off. A leak or a net so tight it felt like prophecy. The drone buzz drew closer, dipping lower. Its camera angled down, searching the spur. She lifted her rifle slowly, not to shoot. Shooting would give away their exact location in the open. Instead, she waited for the drone to hover in front of the sun, a brief silhouette in glare. Then she fired once. The drone shattered. Plastic and metal spun away, falling into the ravine like broken insect wings. The sound was loud in the snow. Enemy fire answered instantly. Rounds snapped into the spur. Snow exploded in small geysers. The squad leader shoved the radio operator down. The machine gunner returned fire, shorter bursts now, conserving ammo. The marksmen shifted position inches at a time, using the minimal cover they had, searching for the enemy sniper again, searching for the next force multiplier that would crack their pursuit. She had few rounds left. The enemy had more, and they had momentum, but they'd lost the clean geometry of their first ambush. Now, they were chasing, and chasing made you sloppy. A distant thump echoed. Not mortar, rotor, a heavier sound. The extraction aircraft appeared at the edge of the valley, cautious, staying high, circling like it didn't trust the snow. It shouldn't. Snow valleys ate machines the same way they ate sound. The squad leader stood and flashed the mirror again, then fired another flare, hands shaking with cold and adrenaline. The aircraft dipped, committed. Enemy fire intensified as soon as they realized what was happening. They weren't stupid. If the patrol lifted out, the package would vanish with them. The propaganda victory would disappear. The intelligence leverage would slip away. The marksman's eyes tracked the ridge. She found movement. An enemy man with a handset, try to rebuild coordination, try and call fires, trying to resurrect the wall of noise. Not the original commander. A replacement. A nerve point. One shot. One change. She steadied, ignoring the aircraft's roar, ignoring the bullets snapping around them. She fired. The man with the handset dropped. Coordination faltered again, just long enough for the aircraft to dip lower and for the squad to begin their frantic run. They moved as a unit now, no longer a group of individuals. The wounded were half carried, half dragged. The medic shouted instructions. The machine gunner laid down the last of his suppression, barrel smoking again, even in cold air. The marksman moved last. Not because she wanted to be seen, because someone had to keep the enemy honest. They reached the aircraft in a blur of snow and noise. Hands grabbed arms. Bodies shoved into the open door. The squad leader hauled the radio operator up, then the medic, then the wounded. The machine gunner climbed in, weapon clutched. The marksman reached the skid and paused for a fraction, scanning back toward the ridge. In that fraction, she saw an enemy figure raise a camera or phone, trying to capture the image of her, trying to turn her into a story the enemy could sell. She fired her last round. The figure fell, the camera tumbling into snow. Then she climbed into the aircraft and vanished into rotor wash and daylight. Back at the outpost, the warmth felt wrong. Heat made the blood in their hands sting. It made frostbitten skin burn as sensation returned. It made the quiet inside a building feel too loud. They sat in the debrief room in damp gear, faces gray with exhaustion, eyes too bright. The platoon commander listened without interrupting as the squad leader described the ambush, the jamming, the funnel of fire. "We lost comms completely," the squad leader said. "They had a relay, portable. They'd built positions. This wasn't chance." The commander's gaze flicked to the marksman. She sat apart. Rifle case leaned against the wall like a loyal animal. Her cheek was cleaned, but still red. She said nothing. "They called for her," the squad leader continued. "They said send the marksman and the package." The room went still. "What package?" the machine gunner asked, voice hoarse. The commander looked at the marksman again. "Show it," he said, not unkindly, just final. She reached into her inner pocket and pulled out the sealed envelope. "I wasn't supposed to carry it," she said finally, her voice low. It was being moved from one unit to another. Chain was slow. They wanted it off the grid until the handoff. "What is it?" the commander asked. She broke the seal, hand steady, and slid out a data module, small, hard, unremarkable. The kind of thing that could fit in a glove and still change a war. "It's a map," she said. "Frequencies, locations, layouts of sensor and jammer networks in this region. Enough to blind patrols. Enough to stage bigger ambushes. Enough to make a small force feel like an army." The commander's jaw tightened. "And the enemy knew you had it." "Yes." "Ow." She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes flicked to the squad leader, then to the radio operator, then back to the commander. "There was a marker in the snow," she said. "A flag. Someone guided firing positions. This was rehearsed. Either the site detected our approach early and triggered a plan they'd built for days, or someone told them we were coming. Told them what we carried. A leak. No one said the word, but it hung in the warm air like smoke." The medic shifted, wincing as he flexed fingers that were still stiff. "They weren't trying to kill us fast," he said. "They wanted us alive. They wanted her alive." "Propaganda," the commander said quietly, and it wasn't a question. "A captured marksman. A stolen module. A video of surrender in the snow." The marksman's gaze dropped to her hands. For a moment, the calm slipped again, revealing something older beneath it. The commander leaned forward. "You left the depression," he said. "You didn't tell them." "I couldn't," she said. "Comms were dead, and if I told them with gestures, they would have tried to stop me. They needed to stay alive. I needed to move." The rifleman who'd called her extra weight stared at the table. His ears were red with shame. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I thought you ran," he admitted. She looked at him then, eyes steady, not angry. "Running is loud," she said. "I don't do loud unless I have to." The commander asked the questions that always came after. Distances, angles, shot counts, timings. He asked about the jammer, the drones, the counter-sniper tactics. She answered with concise facts. Every shot had a reason. Every reason tied back to a teammate still breathing. When the commander finished, he sat back, exhaled, and rubbed his face. "You saved your unit," he said to her. She didn't respond. The squad leader cleared his throat. "She saved all of us," he said, and the words carried weight because they came from a man who didn't hand out respect like candy. The commander nodded once. "The enemy will try again," he said. "They want that module. They want the story. They want to prove they can blind us in daylight." He looked around the room at battered faces. "We're going to find out who told them," he said, "and we're going to burn their relay network to the ground." After the debrief, people drifted away, medic to medical, radio operator to comms, wounded to beds. The outpost returned to its routines, its jokes, its noise. Survival always demanded that you pretend things were normal again. She didn't join the noise. She went outside to the edge of the outpost where the snow began, where the world opened into white distance. The sun was lower now, casting long blue shadows across the drifts. Wind pushed powder across the surface in thin sheets, like a slow tide. She sat on a crate and opened her rifle case. Cleaning was ritual. It was calm. It was a way to turn chaos into steps you could complete. She ran a cloth through the barrel, wiped the bolt, checked the optics damage with a small frown. She worked in silence while behind her the outpost hummed with voices that were louder than usual, not from joy but from relief, the kind that needed sound to stay real. The squad leader approached and stopped a respectful distance away. He didn't speak at first. He watched her hands, the precise movements, the steadiness that felt almost unreal after what they'd lived. Finally, he said, "Why do you do it like that?" She didn't look up. "Like what?" "Like every shot is planned," he said. "Like you're not angry. Like you're not trying to get even." She paused, cloth in hand. For a moment, the wind filled the silence between them. "I used to hesitate," she said. "Once. A long time ago. Someone was near my target. I waited for a clearer shot. I thought I was doing the right thing. In the time I waited, my teammate died." The squad leader swallowed. "I don't chase bodies," she continued. "I chase changes. One shot, one change. If I can break the thing that's killing my people, then maybe they live. That's the only point." He nodded slowly. "You held fire today," he said, remembering something. "There was a man near the commander, like a porter. You waited." She finally looked at him. "I saw him," she said. "He wasn't armed. He was cold and scared. He didn't choose that ridge. I waited until he stepped away." "Moral cost," the squad leader murmured, like he was naming a thing he hadn't understood before. She shrugged, small. "Cost is always there," she said. "You just decide which cost you can live with." He wanted to thank her. He wanted to apologize. He wanted to say 100 things that felt too small. Instead, he said the only true thing he had left. "I'm glad you were there." She returned to cleaning, and the wind carried the rest away. Daylight faded over the snow ridge beyond the outpost, the same kind of ridge that had tried to kill them hours earlier. It looked peaceful now, almost gentle, bathed in blue shadow and pale gold. She finished the last pass of the cloth, set the rifle down, and sat still for a moment, listening to the world. In the distance, someone laughed too loudly. A door slammed. A radio squawked, clear now, free of interference. She didn't smile. She didn't need to, because the loudest thing about that day, the mortar pops, the machine gun roar, the rotor thunder, wasn't what saved them. What saved them was the smallest sound, placed with purpose in a world that tried to swallow it.